Hi there, it's Tuesday, so welcome to the daily video blog. And there's two themes for today. I'm going to talk a little bit up front again about the opening of our household waste sites. And then I'm going to hand over to two key speakers who are going to be talking to you about the really important topic of Victory in Europe Day, VE Day, as most people call it. It's a major event in the history of this country, and one could argue in the world. And it's something that we would normally be celebrating very actively across the county, probably with street parties, road closures and so on. But obviously, given the situation around coronavirus, that's not possible in its current form. So what we're going to do is look at how that can be celebrated using the resources that we have within the council, working very closely with local communities. So I've got two great guest speakers for you today on that particular topic. Before I do that, I just want to talk a little bit more about the topic we talked about yesterday, and that's the reopening of our household waste sites. It's something I've been very much keen to do over recent weeks. I now have confirmation from the police that they will not regard any travel to waste sites as being non-essential. So you can travel there, providing that actually you're taking waste to that site, and particularly if that waste is something that you couldn't normally store at home for reasonable purposes, which is great. Obviously, we don't want to put people in conflict with the law on this. We're reopening 5 of our sites, not all of them. There's normally around 9. We're reopening 5 of those, and the reasons for that is that actually we want to make sure, first of all, that these are sites that can handle potential queues of traffic to get in. And secondly, they are ones that are large enough so that we actually have the ability to have social distancing within the site when people are actually there. There are some other rules around the entry to the site, certainly in the short term. First of all, we're limiting it to residents of Buckinghamshire. So we need proof of your address when you go there. The obvious thing to take is probably your driving licence, which will have obviously your name, but also your residence, which is really important. So we're trying to discourage people from other councils coming along and potentially hogging the queue, quite frankly. We want to give priority to residents from Buckinghamshire. So first of all, you have to be a resident of the county. Secondly, we will be practicing social distancing within the sites. So that will mean only 1 person per car, not 2 or 3. And if you come along with more than that, you may well not get onto the site. So it's 1 person per vehicle, and when you're on the site itself, there'll be a limited number of vehicles. Normally you might have, say, 5 or 6. It might well be that we have fewer than that, given the restrictions of the site, so we can make sure that vehicles are apart and that the occupants of that car are kept separate. And we're also limiting the ability of trailers to access the site. Normally you need a permit to bring a trailer onto the site. But on this occasion, we're not allowing any trailers onto the site. Again, this is for reasons of the actual logistics of the sites and to maintain social distancing. So no trailers, proof of residency within the county, 1 person per vehicle, and obviously we're only opening up currently 5 sites because of the logistics of those sites. So that's the plan. We will obviously over time open up the other 4. But we need to actually have the resources to manage what will inevitably be quite a rush, I think, on the first week or so. These sites are going to stay open. There's no need to crowd down there tomorrow in large numbers. You know, you can go down this weekend coming, next week or whatever. These sites are going to stay open from now on. So please don't all rush down there at 9 o'clock tomorrow morning. Okay, that's it in terms of the household waste sites. Now, the other big topic for today, as I mentioned at the beginning, is the celebration of VE Day, Victory in Europe Day, and we have some great resources online to help people remember that important event and celebrate it. And I'm going to first of all hand over to Gina Nichols, who's from our library service, and then she also has a colleague, Catherine Gwynn, who's from the Centre for Buckinghamshire Studies, and they're going to do a double act in terms of explaining to you what can be done. So first of all, Gina, over to you.
Hello everybody, and thank you very much to Martin for that introduction. As Martin has said, we are moving towards celebrating VE Day this Friday, and I'm sure many of you are getting out the bunting and planning your safe picnic in the garden at home. And you may also be thinking about that first VE Day 75 years ago, and perhaps wishing that you had asked your parents or grandparents a bit more about it, what it was like for them and where they were. Well, this is where your library service can help you. Although our buildings may be closed, we still have some great online resources that you can access free of charge from home with your library card. So why not browse the Times newspaper for May 1945 using the Times Digital Archive? You can read Churchill's speeches, King George's address to the nation, and all about the excited crowds in Piccadilly climbing on the tops of buses to celebrate. If you want to know what was happening wider across the country, have a look at the 19th century British Library newspaper database. Slightly confusing name because it does actually include quite a few newspapers going up to the 1950s now. So you could, for example, read about the colourful streets and happy entertainment taking place in Tamworth. Maybe when you've been taking your exercise locally, walking around your area, you've paused at the War Memorial to look at the names of those men and women who sadly didn't make it back in 1945. You can find out more about these heroes and heroines using the Ancestry genealogical database. It includes the British Army Roll of Honour for 1939 to 1945 and also the British Prisoner of War database. It also has the really fascinating 1939 register, which was a list made just before the outbreak of war of all the households in England and Wales and was later used as a basis for ration cards. So if you're living in an older property, you could perhaps find out who was living there in 1939 and what they did. Or perhaps you can track down your grandparents. Was grandmother described as carrying out unpaid domestic duties, which is a brilliant term for what we might now call a stay-at-home mum, or was she perhaps a nurse, a shop assistant, or a telephonist? When you're having your picnic, perhaps you would like some music to set the mood. So the best place to look there is Naxos Music Online, which has a great selection of 1940s music. Personally, I'm going to be listening to Louis Armstrong, who is my parents' favourite, but you could choose from Glenn Miller, Artie Shaw, Billie Holiday, the Andrews Sisters, and of course Vera Lynn. We also have our e-book library if you just want to sit somewhere quietly with a book. It has two collections on it relating to wartime, fiction and non-fiction. So from the non-fiction collection, you could read about VE Day itself, you could read about the Dam Busters, or perhaps the diary of a wartime nurse. In the fiction, choose from The Eagle Has Landed, The Tattooist of Auschwitz, or The Lilac Girls. There really is something there for all tastes. And we mustn't forget the children either. Maybe they've been doing homework or projects relating to the wartime and VE Day. Britannica Online is a great resource for age-appropriate and accurate information. It has its junior and student collections, so they are aimed at primary and secondary school students. It's also so important to keep children reading, and even though you can't pop down to the library at the moment, we do have ebooks for children as well. So you could look at those all-time favourites such as Goodnight Mr. Tom, The Silver Sword, and many others for children on that site there. There are also lots of activities you can research for children online. Have a look at Bletchley Park's website. The BBC bunting pattern is absolutely great. And there's also the official VEVJ website with lots of ideas for young people too. So as I said before, all these resources can be accessed from home. Our library ones are completely free with your library card. You can find out more information about them all from our website, and they'll also be linked to from our VE Day blog. And if you're not already a member of the library service, as Corporal Jones from Dad's Army would say, don't panic because you can join online. I'm now going to hand over to my colleague Catherine Gwynn from the Centre for Buckinghamshire Studies, who's going to talk to you about their resources. So thank you very much for listening to me and stay safe.
Hello, my name's Catherine. I'm one of the archivists at the Centre for Buckinghamshire Studies. If you've not heard of us before, the Centre is your county archive and your first port of call for any local history questions. Now, on Friday, we're going to be marking the 75th anniversary of VE Day, as Gina and Martin have described. It was essentially the last day of World War II in Europe. In Buckinghamshire, we know that the day was hot and sunny. We also know that in the days running up to VE Day, people were manically trying to buy flags and bunting and make flags and bunting to decorate the fronts of their houses and their streets. We also know that on the day itself, celebrations around the county were quite diverse and included formal parades and processions, street parties, children's parties, religious ceremonies, bonfires and dances. But one thing that linked a lot of these celebrations together was the fact that at 3 p.m. everyone stopped and listened to Winston Churchill's victory speech being broadcast. We've written a short blog piece about VE Day around Buckinghamshire in 1945, and it includes, we focus on 4 particular sites: Farnham Common, Aylesbury, Winslow and Wolverton. And when I was researching this article, it was really surprising just how little material we have about VE Day. We only have 2 photographs for the whole of Buckinghamshire, which is really surprising. So I'd like to ask if anyone has any photographs of VE Day at home, or any documents or any family stories about World War II in the county more generally. I'd really like to hear from you. Our email address is archives@buckinghamshire.gov.uk. Finally, I just want to say a few words about our website, Bombs Over Bucks. A few years ago, we painstakingly pinned every bomb that we know fell on Buckinghamshire onto a digital map, which means that today you can look up where you live and see what bombs fell near you. It's absolutely fascinating. You can find a link to this website and to the article that I mentioned, as well as our contact details on the library's blog. Have a great day on Friday, and I'm going to hand you back to Martin.
Catherine, Gina, thanks very much indeed. That was really interesting, because I suspect people watching this will know by background I'm a historian. I studied history and economics at university, so this to me is a really important topic. And you know, I heard Gina Nussbaum mention the Silver Sword book. I've got to say, I didn't know that was still around. I did that as a text at school decades ago. It's a fantastic book, so really interesting to hear that's still around. And also, just to emphasize one point, VE Day is really important in terms of the end of the war in Europe, but just to recollect that actually the war, of course, in the Far East still carried on. You know, there were a large number of soldiers from across what was then the British Empire, the British Commonwealth, and from other nations who died still fighting out in the Far East until what was then victory over Japan Day, VJ Day. So, you know, this is an important milestone, but not to forget the sacrifices that other men and women made in subsequent months as well. So I really hope that people will join in terms of celebrating and commemorating the sacrifices that people made to give us peace in Europe. Friday is an important day, and there's some great resources available from within the library service, from within our own Centre for Buckinghamshire Studies, but also just by drawing upon the memories of your own relatives as well. So enjoy the day, celebrate it, but also commemorate the sacrifices that were made by all parties on such an important event. Having said that, I'm going to sign off for the day. As always, stay safe, stay well, and I'll see you tomorrow.